Good evening. My name is Lawonda, and I'm co-chair of the Committee for Diversity and Inclusion with the Palm Beach County Bar Association. Welcome to a candid conversation on race, bias, and allyship, hosted by the Palm Beach County Bar Association Committee for Diversity and Inclusion, the Junior League of the Palm Beaches, and the F. Malcolm Cunningham Senior Bar Association. We are truly excited about this partnership. I'm now going to turn it over to Sarah Cohen, co-chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force for the Junior League of the Palm Beaches, to tell you why we started this initiative. I hope you enjoy the program.
Thank you, Lawonda, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Sarah Cohen, and I am on the board of Junior League of the Palm Beaches. Along with my co-chair here, Marcelle Burke, we co-chair the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force for the Junior League. Over the course of the summer, 3 organizations, Junior League, the F. Malcolm Cunningham Bar Association, and the Palm Beach County Bar Association Committee for Diversity and Inclusion, got together to create a series of 3 events focusing on race, bias, allyship, and privilege. We are so excited to present our first event to you this evening, and we welcome you to our candid conversation. I'm very proud to introduce Hershley Auger, president of the F. Malcolm Cunningham Bar Association. Hershley.
Hello, my name is Hershley Auger, and I'm the president of the F. Malcolm Cunningham Senior Bar Association. Thank you for tuning in tonight for a candid conversation. And special thank you to our community partners who helped make this event happen. Our community partners for this event are the Gamma Gamma Sigma chapter of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, the Zeta Tau Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, the West Palm Beach Alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, the West Palm Beach chapter of the Links Incorporated, the Jewish Women's Foundation, Compass, the South Palm Beach Bar Association's Committee of Diversity and Inclusion, and the Women's Foundation of Florida, and Florida Association for Women Lawyers, the Palm Beach chapter. Thank you again to all of our community partners for making this happen. Now I'm going to turn it over to Marcelle Burke, who will be introducing our moderator tonight.
Good evening. When thinking of a moderator for this important conversation, I had an extremely short list of 1. Many of us wake up with her every weekday morning. You can catch her anchoring traffic on Today on 5 on WPTV and anchoring the news of the day from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. on WFLX Fox 29. She's back again for a full hour of news on Today on 5 at 11 on WPTV. Not one to shy away from some of the most pressing social justice issues of our times, she has become a go-to source within the WPTV news organization. Her ability to highlight diversity and different viewpoints while showing off her personality and professionalism on air has made her a favorite with South Florida viewers. During her 16-year journalism career, she has garnered several awards, including an Emmy for anchoring Best Newscast in Roanoke, Virginia. She is a proud graduate of Hampton University, a member of Jack and Jill of America, and belongs to Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. This proud West Palm Beach resident balances all of this with being a wife to a law enforcement officer and a mom to 2 beautiful young daughters. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our moderator, my friend, Hollani Davis.
Women, children, and families. Current priorities, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the short list, but COVID-19, infrastructure and economic development in the Glades region, affordable housing, and fighting for human trafficking. And again, that's just a condensed list. Also tonight, we are privileged to have Tammy Jackson Moore, a Belgrade native, named one of South Florida's most powerful leaders in business and industry this year. Her experience covers all different sectors from not-for-profits, community organizing, business, healthcare. One of her standout achievements is she has founded Tammy's Closet. That was about 12 years ago, a labor of love. The organization helps people dress the part as they enter the workforce. She's also the brainchild behind Guardians of the Glades, which is an advocacy group for Western communities in Palm Beach County. I think for both of these women, not most of these women, but both of these women, I think they'll tell you that their most important job is being a mom.
Oh, absolutely.
And so the stakes are extremely high as we watch kind of the current climate play out in our system, in our country. This is a candid conversation about race, allyship, bias, privilege, and we've heard those words a lot, especially within the last few months: microaggression, racial injustice. And it seems like for some people it's taking on new meaning, new urgency, but at the same time, perhaps maybe we're hearing it so much, people are becoming a little tone deaf. I want to get your take on that in just a minute, but I want to start, and it wasn't my intent to start with the Breonna Taylor decision tonight, but we do have a local protest going on in Lake Worth that's starting very shortly, if it hasn't already. Where are you all on the spectrum? We've been in just a different form of life the last 6 months, and some days people say they're excited about the progress, and other days people say they're exhausted. So Tammy, let me start with you. Where are you today?
I think if you ask people who are Black, African American, they will quickly tell you that the justice system that is for Black people is a different justice system for those who are not Black. So there's a lot of hurt, there's anger, there's the resolve to get things done, to make changes, and people are really, really reassessing whether or not the justice system even works for them. So we see what we see today as well as in the months past, people who are just tired of being tired. They're tired of the justice system, not what we consider working for us. And they're speaking out, because oftentimes when you see people speak out, or they protest, or maybe even riot, and I hate to hear of people rioting,
Yeah.
They're doing that because they're angry, and they're angry for a myriad of reasons. So with the Breonna Taylor announcement on yesterday, people are angry, and it's becoming evident, so much so that you see protests happening all over the country as well as here in Palm Beach County.
I saw a lot today post on social media, many women saying, Black and white, I need a moment today. The mood seems to be heavy. Did you pick that up at all today?
You're talking to a local official who's been having to deal with this from the policy side. At the same time, we're trying to work our way through a pandemic. You know, the mood has been heavy for a very long time. And you know, Tammy talks about the Black community being tired. I'm exhausted, and I'm obviously, I'm not Black. I'm exhausted. We've been running circles around the same conversation and the same issues time and time again. And it has just escalated to such a huge, I don't know, it's combustible. You know, you've got this pandemic, and people are worried about their lives, and they've lost their jobs, and they're seeing these injustices going on in the world. And we haven't had people who have the political will to finally stand up and say enough is enough. And you know, this darkening, this heavy mood that you reference is more out in the open now. Mm-hmm. And you're finally seeing elected leaders stand up and decide, now I finally have the political will to do something. And I hope we're not taking 3 steps forward and 2 steps back for much longer, because this nation right now
And it's funny you say
can't
that.
afford it.
That's been one of the comments that I received today. It does seem like this has been the year where you take 2 steps forward and 5 steps back, and people wonder, okay, what's next?
What's next? Exactly.
I hate
know,
2020.
It's been one of those years. Let's start from the beginning, and you can look at the course of history, obviously, with slave rebellion and boycotts. And now today there's a modern twist with blackouts. What are some of your earliest memories of racism and knowing I'm different?
My skin complexion is not as dark as other Black people, but I do have what they consider to be the Black nose. And so people would look at me and question, was I or wasn't I? But they would always tell me, when I look at your nose, I can see
That you're Black.
that you are Black. That's hurtful. That's hurtful.
Do you remember that, elementary, younger?
I was probably in middle school, and I went to a middle school that was mixed, Black and white, in Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay.
And one of the teachers, as a matter of fact, made that statement to me.
How has that stayed with you, maybe even scarred you to this day?
It made me notice that people are sometimes ignorant, and that people sometimes they base how they feel about people according to what they look like. And that's very much unfair. I have a profound nose, but it's me.
Yeah.
And people need to accept people for who they are, whether the nose is slim, whether the nose is large, whether it's a button nose, whatever nose you may have, it is who you are. And people need to appreciate and recognize.
But all these years later, that's still part of the conversation. People are judged on their nose and their hair, and again, a different element. Your skin is lighter than mine.
Right.
So not only are you fighting racism from the outside, but also within.
Yes, absolutely. The nose, I get, even today, where do you get those eyes from? Why are your eyes green? Rather than just looking at the person to be just that, a person, we're always trying to break things down to the least common denominator. Just accept people for who they are and appreciate them for that.
Commissioner, what about you? I mean, obviously coming to the table with a different perspective, but when did you realize, there's a difference?
So I was raised by a woman who, in the 1960s, during the Civil Rights Movement, my mother was knocking door to door, registering Black voters in some of the tough neighborhoods in Boston. And I went to kindergarten in first grade just outside of Boston on the North Shore. And it was like a little model United Nations in my classroom. And we moved to Florida, and I was 6 years old and halfway through first grade. And I remember being in a classroom and talking to the young girls and my classmates who were Black. And I remember a group of white girls coming up and saying to me, "Why are you talking to them?" And I was, well, why wouldn't I be talking to them? It was and I still remember that. That was first grade.
Is that when you feel like you kind of recognized your own white identity?
6 years old, I recognized that there was an uneasiness, and I don't know, maybe because of the mom who raised me, I felt that there was just something wrong with that comment. I didn't know what it was. I was a kid, but I felt that doesn't sound right. So that was really my first experience as a woman. My first experience with discrimination. I remember interviewing for a job in New Orleans. I was newly married and had moved there and was trying to get a job. And I interviewed for a job that required a bachelor's degree, which I had. And so I went and I interviewed, and the woman looked at that and she said, the woman who was interviewing me, and she said, "Why are you interviewing for this job?" I said, "Well, I meet the minimum qualifications." She said, "Oh, honey, women are only considered extensions of their typewriters here in New Orleans. You're not going to get that job."
Wow.
And very honest with you.
1994.
Not that long ago.
Not that long ago.
Wow.
No.
Well, interestingly enough, maybe about 15 years ago, I was a moderator for a program that was held in Belgrade, as a matter of fact. And I have to say, it was a great, great program. And at the conclusion, a white, maybe 40, 50-year-old female approached me and was really, really talking about how good the program was. And she was very much appreciative. And then she asked me, where do you live? And I told her I live in Belgrade. She said, oh, you talk so well. I didn't think you would live in Belgrade.
The classic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, she could be talking about the way that I talk, or was she talking about it because I was Black? You know, who knows? But sometimes people, they put their foot in their mouth and they say things that are ugly and they say things that are hurtful. And I just try to remember that that's their issue, not my issue.
You know, it's been a little bit of my experience too. During my journalism career, I've had instances where you're up for a certain promotion or a certain assignment and you think you're the best candidate. You're a shoo-in. And I've had people pull me aside and say, there's no way you're going to get that.
Wow.
You know, you don't fit the mold. And you know exactly what that's code for. And it just seems like maybe we're making some strides. What do you all think? And that's where we hear this word ally and allyship. What is the significance that holds for you? Do you see it in your everyday dealings?
Oh my gosh, I see everything in my everyday dealings.
Well, give us the raw.
You know, my job is so diverse right now in the district that I have. I don't know if I see it every day.
Let me ask you this, and I'll probably touch on some nerves here. Everybody's an ally now. Everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon. You know, people have been crying out for years, and now you've got major companies from Nike to Netflix, Disney, you know, makeup brands that are now all of a sudden saying, we hear you. And there's this righteous anger because you say, well, what took so long?
Right.
But at the same time, grateful?
Allyships to me are extremely important. I recognize that as a Black woman, I may or may not have an opportunity to sit at certain tables with people who are not Black. And I think it's important for us to have allies because we need those people that are at those tables to speak up on our behalf. We need those people that understand our plight. They understand our conditions. They understand our shortcomings, those shortcomings that people think that we have, and they can speak up on our behalf when we're not there at those tables.
Commissioner, you've been described in front of the scenes and in certain circles as an ally. You have tons of experience with marginalized communities. What do you think defines you as an ally?
Well, let me go back to my original response. It's been a long day, and you know, maybe I'm a little jaded after the week that I've had. I just want to make sure that these allies that are coming to the table are genuine. And so I try to remain optimistic, but there's a little bit of me that questions, that doubts their longevity.
Yeah.
And as we said earlier, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And are they still going to be here at the table with us after the election? You know, or when this country likes the shiny new object or the issue of the day, you know, when some other crisis comes along, are they going to jump ship and not come back to this one?
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit of my concern. But I've always tried to speak up. You know, in a vulnerable moment, I realized I'm a few chapters in now. I finished Just Mercy not too long ago, but I'm a few chapters in now to how to be an anti-racist. And I have to tell you, I mean, 6 months ago, a year ago, that's not ever a book that I would have picked up at the bookstore. And I realized that I tell that story about, you know, kindergarten and first grade and how my mother raised me. And I have always said, and I think I'm a great ally, but my own being naive, I always used to say, I didn't see color. I was raised not to see color. And, I'm reading this book and I realized what a racist statement that is in and of itself, because you fail to recognize the diversity in the room with you. You should see color, but what you see shouldn't make a difference in how you live and how you make decisions. And so in terms of me being an ally and sitting at the table and using my position to try to make a difference, that is something I'm going to be much more aware of moving forward.
One of the things, and you kind of touched on this, all of these allyships and these companies who are now coming to the forefront, is it disingenuous? Are they in it for the long haul? A lot of folks will say, my company now, all of a sudden, after all these years, maybe they've had some type of sensitivity training. Now everybody is starting kind of a diversity and inclusion committee or a board. And the thing about that is, and then what?
I think what it is now, it's so profound now, that conversation about race and gender is so profound now, and it's making organizations, businesses, corporations recognize that there's some work internally that they should be doing to make certain that they are meeting the needs and really being inclusive of everybody who's a part of their team. A lot of people don't do it well, and they're trying to get that right.
Are you seeing it from the aspect, though, people obviously are acknowledging there's a problem, corporations, are they being willing to be held accountable? Are they willing to do the work? And again, quota is not just enough anymore, but hiring people from various backgrounds and walks of life who hold leadership positions. It's like one of those things, you can't change stuff out in the field. It has to change in the front office.
Right.
Are you seeing some of those shifts behind the scenes?
Well, I mean, the county has been a leader in terms of developing programs and resetting policies and opening up these offices and doing this Minority Women Business Enterprise program. It's not enough. All of these, these committees that these corporations are putting together, let's focus on diversifying our workforce and, let's focus on recognizing our implicit biases and let's do all that. Well, that's fine and dandy.
Sure.
But if we don't start looking at the policies that led to the lack of diversity at the table, let's go back to the very, very root. To me, there is nothing more important aside from healthcare. There's nothing more important in determining a child's success than their housing. And you want to talk about racist policies, the lending industry, why is it harder for Tammy and her community to get a home loan than it is for a community like Wellington and the people who live there? Like, what are the policies that have led to this lack of diversity, that have led to this discrimination? And like I said, it's great that the CEO of a corporation wants to make their boardroom table look better and look more diverse.
Right.
But that's such a small sliver of the problem. We need programs and policies in place that help get those men and women to that table.
Absolutely.
I don't want this just to be we're trying to make a beautiful rainbow.
Absolutely.
When you talk about that, Citigroup put a number on it today and said in the last 20 years, the U.S. has lost $16 trillion because of racist policies in terms of housing, education, lost business opportunities, wages. And so it's almost like, okay, we're doing something, but as you said, I mean, we're so deep in the hole and so far behind, and you wonder, as you mentioned, does this fade away in 6 months, perhaps when there's not so much pressure on the issue?
It's politics.
I think it behooves us to make certain that it doesn't go away.
Right.
We have to make certain that we keep our finger on the pulse of that, and then almost like demand that businesses, organizations, and corporations that create these organizations that say that we're going to deal with diversity and inclusion. We got to demand that they put resources behind that so that it can be what it needs to be. You know, it's one thing if you say you're going to do something, but you got to have resources to make it happen.
But doesn't it go back to changing the mindset as well? You know, this is so deeply rooted, whether you're on this side or that side, whatever your values, your systemic beliefs are. I had a friend today and we were talking, and we've been friends for 15 years. And I asked her, I said, what do you do to not be identified as a Karen? And that's a generalized term that people are now using to describe white women. And she said, well, I like to call the police. And I thought, wait, I know this person. She's in my inner circle. What do you mean you like to call the police? And she said, well, you know, if I just see something that's not right, or so I asked her, I said, are you acting more so in the manner of a good Samaritan, or is there an unconscious bias? And she had to think about it. And she brought to my attention, she lives in Northern Virginia, in an area of mixed housing, $1 million homes in the front, Section 8 in the back. And one night, Section 8 folks were playing loud music. She had to go to work the next day. And she said, I almost called the police, but I had to realize, why was I calling the police on people that didn't look like me and they weren't doing anything? She's evolving. Some people are evolving, but it's so deeply rooted that you don't even notice.
Right. A lot of people, they don't recognize what they're doing as it relates to racism. I think at the end of the day, if we can really get to a point to where we truly understand and respect each other and begin to, that old saying that we say all the time, walk a mile in my shoes. If people can walk a mile in shoes of another person, I think they will truly, truly understand some of the challenges that they have.
What
Some
does it
people just
cost
don't
you
know.
in terms of not just recognizing it, but maybe confronting it when you see it? Has it come at a cost?
I've been labeled, and maybe the commissioner can probably agree with that, as the one who's always complaining. And it's not complaining when you bring an issue to the forefront. Why does it have to be a complaint? Why can't we have that conversation about addressing or identifying what the issue is so that we can all come to an agreement and move forward on it? So, you know, you hear some people saying that, oh, she's just going to always be the complainer. Every time she shows up, it's an issue, it's a problem, but that's not necessarily the case. It's just, I want to have this conversation with you. This is not because we disagree on something.
And it's not an easy conversation.
No, it's not an easy conversation, but I think if we had had a lot of these conversations that we're having today, if we had had some of these in the past, we probably wouldn't be at this juncture where we are today.
What does it cost you in some of your inner dealings?
Well, let me just say that Tammy has one point of view, my point of view on Tammy Jackson Moore and the Blades. Remember, I was running for re-election. I was like, I hope she doesn't run against me. You know, I have decided that there are just some people that you can't change. And I have disassociated myself with some of those people. I've had arguments with people that I love, and my kids set me straight. You know, I've got 19, 20, and 22, and they're not afraid to speak their mind, and they see the world the way I hope that this country eventually gets. And, you know, this whole Black Lives Matter, and then this whole retort of, well, all lives matter. Well, yes, of course, all lives matter. But right now, the people in our community that are hurting because of discriminatory policies that we've got in this country and the treatment that results from those are Black people. And right now we're talking about their lives because they're hurting. And, you know, some folks will, oh, well, I never thought of it that way. But other people are just like, oh, she's gone off the deep end.
Do you feel like you've been more effective than not when having these tough conversations and trying to get people to evolve? Because the thing is, you can say, well, and you're absolutely right, there are some people that you're just not going to change. But in order for us to have some type of true sustained progress, you got to start converting folks.
The way because I'm kind of a policy nerd, I feel the way that I have been able to be more effective, well, two things. I've done a lot of panels with Tammy, just listening for a while and not always being, it's hard for a politician to not talk, but to just shut up and listen has been very effective. But then, you know, I mentioned the banking policies. When I put voice to the issues, those deeper root policy issues that we've got, I'm more effective when I lead that conversation.
I think that in some people, racism is so deeply ingrained within them. There are some people that you're just not going to be able to get to. However, if you identify there is that one person that may be willing to just listen and listen to be heard, not listen to respond, you might be able to really, really get them to understand some of the issues and concerns that Black and brown people have.
A lot of it, I find too, when you're having just generalized conversations, if I'm out on stories, it's fear. If I give to you, it takes away from me. If I have to give up my power to benefit you, then what am I left with? When it doesn't have to be that way.
No, it doesn't.
And yet you still can't make headway sometimes.
I think the value of diversity is what's missing in a lot of people and a lot of conversations and situations. Some people just don't understand the beauty in diversity, the beauty that different people from different backgrounds, different races bring to the table. And until we get there, until everybody understands that there's beauty in diversity, we're always going to have some of the challenges that we see today.
So in terms of building that diversity and creating more of those partnerships, those allyships. I heard you mention one do, and this is probably a powerful one, but you got to listen.
Yeah.
What are some other do's and don'ts to being an effective ally?
You've got to recognize, you've got to be able to recognize and acknowledge your own biases. And you have to be transparent in your struggles, and you can never forget where you came from. And I think that's pretty powerful. You know, and when I talk about recognizing resilience, I had a great opportunity 2 years ago to complete the Leadership Florida program. And one of the exercises our class did was an exercise called the Privilege Walk. And so there's 55 in every annual class, there's 55 of us. And so probably 50 of us were spread across a convention hall in a hotel in Tampa, pre-COVID. And the moderator asked all of these privilege questions. So as if you had a parent at home or two parents at home, take 2 steps forward. And, you know, and you started seeing all of these people who were in the same leadership program who got there on their own accolades, right? And then you start seeing this separation in this group. Right. And you look around and the people you least expected to be in the back of the room who had the least privilege growing up, but here they are in the same room with these other leaders. And I think that exercise, and I was second from the back. And I don't think most people expected that I would be back there. And if we can start recognizing all of the differences that we have, but how did we all end up in the same room together?
That's powerful.
And so being around different people but looking deeper at them and asking questions about where did you come from? Where is your family from? Getting a better understanding of people. Listening is one thing, but actually just talking to a person as a person, I think is pretty powerful. And I think that's how you form those allies, when you realize those connections that you have from something in your past or something in your family, you build that connection.
You described yourself as a policy nerd.
Yeah.
In a way, doesn't some of that from a policy standpoint almost have to be spelled out and mandated? Because again, some folks just aren't going to come to the table.
I know, and that's frustrating. I hate mandates, but you know, not that I agree with him on everything, but I'll never forget being early volunteer with actually one of our sponsors this evening with the Junior League and being in a meeting in Tallahassee with now Senator Marco Rubio. And he said, well, some things just have to be legislated. And so some things have to be mandated, have to be ordered. And we have to be careful how we do those. But yeah, sometimes we have to. Our whole MWBE program at the county had to be mandated.
And when we're talking about mandates and policy, I think it behooves us to make certain that we have people that are a part of that conversation that look like you and I, our other populations, because we need to make certain that they're included. Their businesses, their organizations, whatever the policy is that's being made, they need to have an opportunity to have their voices made throughout that policy making.
Let me get your reaction yesterday to the CEO of Wells Fargo basically saying, and this was an earlier memo this summer that had resurfaced, but in terms of recruiting and picking out talent, that the black pool of applicants was very skimpy.
When I first heard that, I immediately got angry, but then I started thinking, where are their headhunters seeking these employees? So it really made me think that not only is the CEO, let me say, out of order for his comments, but those people who he have working for him truly aren't really engaged in what the community looks like and the resources that are available in the community. Because if the headhunters and the HR professionals aren't noticing and aren't identifying that these people do exist, there's an issue. We've got to go to these organizations, to these institutions, to these colleges. HBCUs are some wonderful organizations, and they're putting out a wealth of talent every single year. We gotta rely on them, and we gotta utilize their resources that they have. There are some amazing Black and brown people in our country, in our state, in our county, and we gotta really rely on them and give them an opportunity to step up and be a part.
You're in a position, Commissioner, of making decisions that impact thousands of people. Oftentimes there's a slip up, and it just seems so cavalier now, but people can say something and then say, I'm sorry. But at this point in 2020, when you're talking about race and unity, injustice, it's almost like a given. You should know. Do you ever feel that frustration?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm like, here he is, the CEO of a major banking institution where Black folk have their dollars, where Black businesses have their dollars, and he had the audacity to make that comment. That was hurtful. It angered people so much so.
Well, it's inaccurate.
And it's inaccurate. So much so that people are really talking about, if you have money in Wells Fargo, pull it out.
But again, it's one of those examples where you see that form of leadership, but then you have someone like Mackenzie Scott, who is the world's wealthiest woman, divorcee from Jeff Bezos. And she made this incredible contribution to HBCUs. People say, she is the epitome of an ally. How do you get to those Mackenzie Scotts and not necessarily these other CEOs who are counting marginalized communities out?
How do you get to them? You got to engage them in the conversation. And, it's like throwing your fishing line into a pond and hoping that you get a good fish. I mean, you may have 100 in there, and if you can pull out 2, that's a good day. I don't think there's any secret recipe other than just doing your homework and finding those people. I'm going to try to be optimistic in the year 2020, which is a really hard thing to do.
We're running out of time.
Yeah. And I'm going to, I know, something good's got to happen before the end of the year. I have to believe every day when I get up that most of the people are like Mackenzie. I just have to believe it. You've got to bring them out. You've got to make the issue relatable to them. You've got to give them buy-in. They have to connect. You've got to connect with the people who care in order to get them involved. And it's harder to do right now because of the pandemic we're in. But you've got to just connect with people.
Have you had, and I'll pose this to both of you all, a moment, you know, the pandemic really ramped up starting in March. We had some killings that were very high profile. Has there just been a day, one day, maybe not the whole day, but where you felt overwhelmed
Yes.
and defeated, and you think,
I don't necessarily think defeated, but overwhelmed, so much to the point to where I say, I got to get back up because we got to make certain that this doesn't happen again. So it has encouraged me to dig a little deeper, to go a little harder on behalf of Black and brown people.
what does that look like for you, digging deeper, working harder?
Really, really engaging the Black community, educating the Black community, and just being there to, number one, there's a lot of anger, so you got to hear. You got to listen to them. You got to hear them out, and then hopefully provide them with resources or guidance as it relates to how to get rid of that anger and that frustration. You know, if they need to walk it out, if they need to talk to a clergy, you need to be able to provide them that direction and that guidance to make it happen. But, you know, when you hear about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, first you get angry. You're burning up on the inside. But then you say, okay, what can I do to make certain that this doesn't happen again? Or what can I do to begin to help my community to heal? And that's what drives me every single day, to make certain that the community is feeling some healing.
A low moment for you, maybe more lows than highs sometimes?
I think my low moment happened last Tuesday very publicly. You know, I just hit a wall regarding my daughter and had a bit of a mama bear moment on social media. And I think it was just a culmination of frustration. I mean, here, we're all sitting here and we're sharing very personal stories, and we're using our experiences to try to drive change. And I had a moment last week where my daughter had been rushed to an emergency room with possible COVID complications. And you know, I mean, you've got this whole community that wants to pretend that this virus isn't serious in young people. And here I'm like, yeah, actually it is. Here's my experience. And, you know, I'm going to consider that when I'm deciding how we reopen this county. And the level of hate and nastiness just totally caught me off guard. And the name calling and the profiling they did of my daughter because of her appearance and the fact that she tattooed her stepbrother, who she lost to an overdose in April. She tattooed his name on her arm. And, you know, all of these, oh, she's white trash, or she's a skank whore was probably the worst one. And I lost my faith in humanity. And I put my elected official hat off and I put my mama hat on, and I defended my daughter. And then I realized, I'm like, some people, you're just not going to change. And that's the way of the world. But I think right now, this entire country is on fire. Some parts of it literally. And people are just hurting. They're hurting financially, right. They're hurting physically, you know, they're hurting spiritually, they're hurting, you know, their fear. I mean, a young Black man he's got to be scared to death to drive his car at night and see a police officer or a police vehicle on the side of the road. There's just so much fear, and there's so much on the other side, there's hate, and there's just this complete lack of empathy and leadership from some of the highest levels of our government in this country that is doing nothing to quell all of the, you know, the anxiety that our country is facing.
It's so interesting that you bring up the interaction that you had last week with your daughter putting on your mama bear hat.
Yeah.
And the animosity that was spewed toward you, which takes me back to, again, and you know, tonight we've been talking about race, Black and white, but not to forget Hispanics or the Haitian community, the LGBTQ plus community. Palm Beach County has made some strides, public bathrooms, and trying to make those more accessible to the LGBT community.
Okay.
What other things are on tap to, again, foster that diversity and make people feel more included? Do you know of any projects?
Well, in our budget conversations recently, we talked about establishing an Office of Equality and Diversity to really have a landing spot and some community leaders to run that office to make sure we don't lose the progress we've made thus far and finally recognizing and being willing. Make sure we don't lose that political will. You know, I brought up this idea of this great program that they do in Leon County, and they do it down in Broward County called Village Square. And Tammy has really taken the lead with that with Vice Mayor Katrina Long Robinson from Westlake. And that is, it's politicians don't run it. It's not our gig. It is community leaders, and they can invite us to the table, but it's all of these public forums, and it provides a safe space for people to come and express their fears and their concerns. And so the county is going to work with our community leaders to try to make sure that that can happen. Really engaging our minority-owned businesses and making sure that they have opportunities to get county contracts. We've done a program where we've created an incentive program. If you're the contractor doing a project in the Glades area, and you hire employees from the Glades to work on that county project, we will help reimburse wages. You know, and another population, you know, that I worked to try to help early on in my first term, pregnant women. I probably faced the most discrimination I've ever faced in my life when I was working full-time and I was pregnant. And so we created a paid parental leave for mothers and fathers for fostering, adopting, or birthing a child, you know, and just trying to create this welcoming family environment of we're going to take care of you and we're going to help your family. So those are just some of the, you know, some of the things that we're doing, and having these community forums. You know, we did one with law enforcement. I talked about Just Mercy, making sure. You know, we're so focused on law enforcement reform, and I applaud Sheriff Bradshaw and some other municipal law enforcement agencies came to the table with us that day. But I don't think I have to tell you, sitting in the Palm Beach County Bar Association offices tonight, that if you don't include the judiciary and you don't include the Bar Association, that includes the defense attorneys and the prosecutors and this whole law enforcement reform, it's not law enforcement reform.
Again, going back to accountability.
Criminal justice reform. And so I think you'll see leadership from the county commission in making sure that we continue those conversations and not just reforming one piece of the puzzle, but trying to reform system-wide.
I think you guys will agree any change that we've ever seen has been a long time coming. It's been fought for very hard. A year from now, where do you think we'll be?
You know, interesting you asked that. I think a year from now, we would have had several more conversations like we're having tonight with several different people from several different communities. But I think until we truly, truly understand that there's value in agreeing to disagree, and because I disagree with you or your policy or your thought process, doesn't mean that I disagree with you. It just means that I disagree with the policy and the thought process. And if we can respect that, I think we will be much further along next year than where we are now. It's all about a level of respect, accepting people where they are, and then helping them to understand what you think, and then you at the same time understand what they think.
And it sounds like you're hopeful. Why are you maybe more, and I may be wrong here, but more hopeful that things will change when we have a history where it's just been such a hard fight?
Because we're not going anywhere. Black people are here. We're not going anywhere. So because we're not going anywhere, we have to make the best of what we have and then try to make it better than what it is today. So if we're hopeful, we know that we can make things better. And I pray and I envision things to be so much better for the Black community within the very near future.
Commissioner, getting out there, rolling the sleeves up. What do you see us a year from now?
It depends on November 3rd. You know, I don't think I've ever been scared about an election day, and I'm scared this year. So I'll try to be optimistic. Hopefully we've put our gloves down and, put pen and paper in our hand instead and tried to come up with solutions. And I think what differentiates what we're seeing today versus what we've seen in the past, and why I might be optimistic that we might see more progress, is because we've got the young people involved. This isn't mom and dad and grandpa and grandma having the conversations. These are our kids having the conversations and looking to us and saying, we're going to drive you absolutely crazy until you do something about this. I mean, we've got kids, you've had teenagers. Mm-hmm. The worst thing you can do to a young person is tell them, I'm not talking to you. It is my way or the highway, and shut your door. I mean, my daughter took the doorknob off my door one year, so I couldn't shut it on her. I was impressed she knew how to use the tools, but the young people are involved. Mm-hmm. That is what's going to make change. Look at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas and the fact that the Florida legislature pushed gun reform, and they didn't do it because there was a school shooting. They did it because the young people who were affected by that school shooting would not let up, and they made a difference. And I think that at the end of the day, that is what is going to make the difference this time around compared to, Rodney King in LA a couple of decades ago.
I think what's helpful too is that we see more and more Black leadership stepping forward. Whether they be elected, appointed, or just identified as community leaders. They're stepping forward now because we want to preserve, we want to help, and we want to grow our communities. And we can do it. And we need people to exhibit that leadership to make it happen. And you're seeing that now. You're seeing more and more Black people running for elected office.
I have a minute left. Final thoughts in terms of somebody sitting at home, they're watching this and they're saying, I want to do better. I want to have a change of heart. I want to get involved. I want to be an ally. How do they start?
I think the best part, the best thing to do is to listen. Listen with an open heart, an open mind, and then truly, truly work at understanding what it is that you're hearing. That's the best thing. Black folk are just looking for an opportunity for people to just listen to them and hear their concerns, and then hear some of the suggestions that they might have to address those concerns. Same thing with white people. We want to hear what the white people have to say, and just really, really have that open and sincere dialogue back and forth with each other. That's the only way we can make it happen.
Final thoughts in 30 seconds.
Take a deep breath and recognize that the allies want you to come to the table, and that there's not going to be any judgment. If you take that step forward, it's like coming into an AA meeting. You recognize that you want to change and you want to move forward in a different light. The table is open. Come on out. We got a spot for you.
Commissioner Melissa McKinlay, Tammy Jackson-Moore, thank you all. I'm not sure that we solved any of the world's greatest problems tonight, but it's the open dialogue that continues to foster change. We appreciate you, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to our facilitator, Hollani Davis, and our panelists, Commissioner McKinlay and Tammy Jackson-Moore. This conversation was raw, honest, and definitely candid. We have a token of our appreciation beneath the coffee table for each of you. So thank you again. This conversation is just the beginning. Over the next year, we will host a series of events and trainings to address biases, privileges, and battle racism. I'll leave you with this. Whatever your position, wherever you live, whatever your race, let's keep our fingers on the pulse. Please continue this conversation in your personal lives. Be an ally. Good night, and thank you for joining us tonight for this candid conversation.